This is the all-ground coffee grinder made by Sanremo in collaboration with Italian coffee grinder manufacturers Fiorenzato. It's a 64mm flat burr coffee grinder that promises both great espresso and filter coffee. It currently retails from £739 up to £8.99 on our website. So let's dive into the grinder and all of its features and quirks and help you decide if it's the right grinder for you. Before we get started, make sure to check out last week's review of the Malkönig X54. In the next few weeks, we'll be putting these two grinders up against each other in a head-to-head review. So make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our latest videos. Fiorenzato are a coffee grinder manufacturer from Italy that started in 1936. Since then, they've been making both commercial and domestic-focused espresso grinders. As far as I am aware, the all-ground was first released back in 2021, and they have since partnered up with Sanremo to release a new range of colors that perfectly match the Sanremo Cube espresso machines. Aside from the different colors available, the Sanremo and Fiorenzato all-ground grinders are essentially the same machine. The all-ground features steel 64mm flat burrs with a titanium coating that are made in-house by Fiorenzato themselves. So they have stated that the burrs are able to produce a bimodal grounds distribution with a good amount of fines at the espresso range for syrupy and complex shots, whilst also having a more uniform grind size at the coarser end for improved clarity and acidity in filter coffees. We'll dive a little bit deeper into how the coffee is tasting towards the end of the review. So the all-ground is rated for 1.4 tons of coffee, or 1.4 million grams, making it perfectly capable for having in the home, even with larger families, and could even work very nicely in a cafe as the secondary decaf, guest espresso or filter grinder, or in any kind of small business that just wants to be able to serve their guest a great coffee. So depending on the design choice that you go for, the grinder ranges from £700 to £900. And for that kind of money, you should absolutely expect a well-built grinder with tight tolerances, heavy-duty materials, and precise machining. And the all-ground certainly doesn't disappoint in that aspect. It weighs in at 9 kilos, and for the most part, everything feels incredibly well built and solid to the touch. The adjustment ring is very satisfying to turn and click into place. The main body is solid and doesn't rock back and forth when grinding, and the portafilter is kept in very securely by the fork when grinding. There's a large knurled on and off button towards the right hand side, which is very satisfying to use when you twist to turn on the grinder, and a decently sized touchscreen on the front that hosts the main functions of the grinder. The grinder is built to be incredibly easy to clean, with the burrs being very easy to access. All you have to do is remove the hopper and twist the dial all the way coarse. Then press on the red button and lift. And then the adjustment dial comes off and you can lift off the top burr carrier and you've got instant access to the grinding chamber. There's no real way to calibrate the grind setting, but the tolerances mean that every time you reassemble the burrs, it will be perfectly positioned and you don't need to worry about accidentally dialing too fine and having the burrs grinding against each other. The grounds chute is also very easy to clean, being held on with magnets, so you can just remove it out the grind chamber and give it a quick wipe down. The grinder is pretty quiet, especially when running on empty, and the grinding sound isn't too loud or offensive in any way. The hopper can hold up to 500 grams of coffee, and we haven't had any issues with beans getting stuck inside the burr chamber. I do have a few nitpicks in terms of the build quality and design. Firstly is that the hopper and the bean gate aren't locked into place in any meaningful way and can be accidentally moved quite easily. You'll just need to be a little bit careful when you're moving the hopper around to make sure you're not spilling any beans on the floor. On our particular model, we also found that the rubber ring around the adjustment dial was coming away from the dial in a few places, but that could be fixed by just popping it back into place. So the main area that you'll interact with the grinder on a daily basis is the touchscreen. So it's really great to see that it's very bright and clear with no complicated menu system or user interface. At first, I did struggle a bit with the touchscreen and thought I was having some issues with it being a little slow to respond. It just turned out that when you're in espresso grinding mode, the manual button responds instantly to the touch, whereas the single and double shot buttons only activate when your finger has left the screen. That probably helps it identify between a short press for grinding and a longer press for changing dose. Just something to be mindful of, and you'll get the hang of it very quickly. So there are 3 different grinding modes depending on where your grind is set on the dial, whether you're you're in the espresso, mocha, or filter range. And the 3 different grinding modes all make a small impact on your workflow. So in espresso mode, you have the option of a single or a double shot, which are both timed doses that can be fine-tuned using a long press on the screen. There's also a manual grind button should you need to purge or top up your dose as needed. In the mocha pot range, you only get 1 manual button, which you hold down for continuous grinding. I think the idea here is that you'll place your mocha basket under the grind chute and grind until it's completely full, and simply use the size of the basket as your dosing mechanism. And finally, you have the filter mode, which again just has 1 button, but is pressed to start and stop the grinder rather than holding it down for continuous grinding. So the all-ground has a stepped grinding system going from 0 up to 80 clicks, and all falling under either espresso, mocha, or filter grind sizes. And these equate to about 0 to 40 clicks for espresso, 41 to 59 for mocha, and 60 to 80 for filter. In reality though, the filter settings are much coarser than I would personally ever use for a V60, a Chemex, or even a batch brewer. And for a light roast 1 cup V60, I was at the very bottom of the mocha pot range at about 40 to 45 clicks. Having such a large portion of the grind size being dedicated to mocha pot brewing is also slightly strange to me personally. I'm not entirely convinced that there's a huge number of people that would spend 700, 900 pounds on a flat burr grinder like this and then brew with a mocha pot. But I guess this grinder is coming from 2 Italian companies, and you can definitely see the influence there. One of the main concerns with using a stepped grinder, especially when grinding for espresso, is that you might not be able to fine-tune your grind size enough. So to test if this was a problem on the all-ground, I ran 2 shots back to back, firstly at 15 clicks. The recipe was an 18-gram dose and 72 ml of brew water going through the puck. The first shot ran at 28.6 seconds. Then I went to 16 clicks and I got a 26.8 extraction time using the exact same recipe. So those steps are absolutely small enough for you to properly dial in your extraction time just using grind size, before you even have to think about using other variables like your dose or your temperature. So the grinder looks and feels great. You know, it's very heavy duty, made of great materials, and it feels really nice. And user experience when actually grinding as well is also very impressive. The grinder is relatively quiet and the sound isn't offensive in any way at all. The distribution of the grounds is pretty fantastic with no clumping and a nice fluffy texture. And the grounds go straight into the middle of the portafilter, so there's no issues with spillage. You can also tap the portafilter gently when you're midway through grinding to help level the bed of grounds, distribute into the basket properly, and avoid any spillage. Levels of static are also really impressive. All coffee grinders will make a little bit of mess with grounds clinging to the machine and flying out of the portafilter, but with the all ground it was hardly noticeable at all. The portafilter fork is adjustable using an Allen key, and the holder does a great job of keeping the portafilter in place during grinding with no movement or vibrating at all. The rubber tips also help absorb some of those vibrations, so there's no noticeable sound caused by the portafilter when you're grinding. So most grinders will typically fit into one of 2 categories, either single dosing or on demand. And on the surface of it, the all-ground does appear to be an on-demand grinder. It's got that typical large hopper on the top and that grind by time system. But in actual fact, the all-ground can be used as somewhat of a hybrid due to the separate grinding modes for espresso, mocha, and filter. When grinding for espresso, the all-ground is designed to be used on demand with a full hopper and using the timer for the doses. However, when you're grinding for filter, due to the on and off button, it actually makes more sense to weigh out your beans first and then single dose exactly what you need into the hopper. And if you want to, you can also remove the hopper and weigh out your beans and then dose directly into the burr chamber. Or you can buy a different attachment with a set of bellows to help you blow out any grounds or beans that might be stuck inside the burr chamber and reduce the retention. Speaking of, this grinder does suffer a little bit from retention, and you can tell after you've ground a shot for espresso, if you just knock the grinder, you will have some grounds falling out of the chute. To combat this, many people recommend purging about 10 to 12 grams through the grinder after you change grind size. And I do think that is good advice, especially when you're going from a coarser grind size down to something like espresso, just to clear anything that might have been left inside the burr chamber. One of the main considerations that you want to think about when you're buying into a new grinder is whether you want a flat burr or a conical burr system. Typically, a conical burr will have more of a range in its grind distribution, producing more fines and boulders, leading to more complexity in the cup, more texture and more body in espresso. On the other hand, with flat burr grinders, you usually get a more uniform grind size, which enhances clarity and gives you more of a precise flavor note, rather than having an overall more complex cup. With the all ground, I've actually found that the flat burrs give more of a conical burr-like grind distribution. It produced very complex and full-bodied shots of espresso, which worked really well at medium to dark roasts and with shorter ratios, whilst filter coffee was nice and complex and had a good sweetness, but was difficult to pick out on the specific flavor notes. Having a grinder that produces more fines and boulders works great for those textured shots of espresso that the Italian coffee culture is known for. Whether that might be something that you're interested in really comes down to personal preference. Personally, I've really enjoyed the espresso that has been coming out of this grinder. It's been really nice and full-bodied and syrupy. But for filter coffee, I do personally prefer a more uniform grind size, just to get a bit more clarity in the cup. So for my final thoughts on the all ground, it's been a really enjoyable grinder to use. It's got a really nice heavy duty feel, large capacity, quiet grinding, and it's incredibly easy to clean and maintain. It's got a great grind range all the way from espresso up to cold brew, and it produces rich and syrupy shots of espresso and makes complex filter coffees. The main annoyance with this grinder for me was the fact that you can't override the 3 different grinding modes, and the fact that the suggested grind sizes were actually quite far away from the coffees that I was brewing. At 700 to 900 pounds, this grinder is quite an investment for the domestic user, but having said that, it does provide good value for money, with great machining and tolerances and a great overall user experience. Being rated for 1.4 tons of coffee, the all ground would make for a great investment for a cafe who are looking to also offer a guest espresso, a decaf or a filter coffee, or for small businesses of any kind that just want to serve their customer a nice coffee, like in a car showroom or a barber shop. So hit the link down in the description if you want to check out the all ground for yourself. That will take you straight to our website. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and please feel free to leave a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and we'll see you next week.